The first reason that a Long Night prequel is a bad idea, and the most obvious, is that it is very specifically a rehash of the White Walker storyline, which already dominated the later TV seasons of Game of Thrones, so it's still very fresh in everyone's minds. This isn't a logical follow-up to that. Just, wow, wasn't Kit Harington fighting ice zombies cool? Let's do another one to hook back the audience. I have other videos on my channel on this, that many of the major events, which sometimes were kind of weird in the later TV seasons, are pure inventions that probably aren't going to happen in the books, that are there just to show off the actors. And they usually admit this in interviews and DVD commentary. We did this to pander the actors. That we're making a big... Last year they had this big push to get Kit Harington a Golden Globe, and they're vanity projects, and they're rewriting the story to showcase the actors. It's become celebrity culture. That they liked that Kit Harington did his own fight scenes in Season 4 for the Battle of Castle Black, and other stuff where they're fighting White Walkers and zombies in the early seasons. So they said, let's just have a big scene of that in Season 5, Hardhome, and they put so much time and energy in that, which was sapped out of the rest of Season 5, which was easily their worst season in terms of just executing anything, executing their production dates, and for empty spectacle. That Hardhome, the event happens in the books off-screen. They just get a letter from a scout that Jon Snow isn't there. This has nothing to do with condensing the storyline. They wanted to show off Kit. It's not even Jon Snow. This stereotype of Jon Snow swinging his Valyrian steel sword, fighting ice zombies and White Walkers, this silhouette, this stereotype. And it was throwing a lot of money at the screen, but it was kind of empty. Not blaming the director or stunt coordinators, they were great. It's just from a technical perspective, it's just from a story perspective, this is just spectacle. And then they did the same thing again in Season 7. I even predicted before it would happen. Look, they're going to make another thing showing off Kit that's going to be a rip-off of Hardhome, just as Hardhome was a retread of earlier stuff. So it's a watered-down version of something watered down, that by Season 7, with the White Hunt, where they go beyond the wall to catch a White, they didn't think of good reasons for it to be happening. Like, Hardhome at least had a set. There isn't a physical set in Season 7. It's him standing in the middle of the snow beyond the wall, just fighting zombies. And it got repetitive, and even mainstream sources are beginning to notice this. The problem with them as a villain, it's not even just that, oh, it's a retread of the same villains. Zombies and White Walkers are not characters. They don't talk at all. And their only motivation is kill. With the zombies, even the White Walkers, we found out they're not really a race. They're magical weapons created by the children of the forest. And they say this in behind-the-scenes videos. It's on purpose that they don't talk. Why would the Grim Reaper talk? Why would Death talk? So the Night King never talks. And I agree with that. Death wouldn't talk. That's one way of doing it. But you also wouldn't make the Grim Reaper, a non-talking version of the Grim Reaper or Death, a main character like that. You would have how everyone reacts to that, of that the real villains are the human ones, like Cersei or Euron, other characters. That's hard to sustain as the primary villain, and a lot of people are pointing out the later seasons are getting kind of boring because the White Walkers aren't political. They're almost a force of nature, that it's missing all of the political intrigue stuff that happened with the human villains in earlier seasons. And even then, it's supposed to be how humans react to that. And you could plausibly do, well, how are humans reacting to the White Walkers in any given setting, but it's still difficult. That you can't make them the primary villain if the selling point openly says, well, actually, we're focusing on how people react to them because, they don't talk. You're already running into problems with that. That as straight-up villains, they're not very interesting. They have no characterization, even if they don't talk. I've seen some, movie monsters who don't talk, but still have characterization. They don't. They're zombies. And we saw that already. And so they're the same villains, literally. There's no new variation on them. And even the individual characters, the Night King isn't much of a character, and he's probably almost certainly an invention of the TV show, just to give Kit Harington someone to glare at. Like one individual leader, we don't think the books... I actually managed to ask George R. R. Martin about that in a blog post a while ago. I talked about that in another video, and he gave a cryptic answer of, well, he's not the same as that other character in the book with a similar name. That's kind of an invention of the show. He was vague, but I really don't think he came up with that. They wanted a villain hero for the primary villain for the hero to focus on. And even then, the Night King doesn't talk, so they're literally the same villains, and they have no characterization. And we just saw that. So, thankfully, this is not a books versus TV series thing, where, that book fandom always telling us we can't do Dorne that way, and then it turns out Dorne is terrible, or Stannis actually should beat the Boltons because he's Stannis. He's the best military commander. No, this isn't books versus TV series like that. Even people who saw the TV series were saying this is a retread of what's become the dominant storyline in the later TV seasons. Particularly them, because hardcore book fans were really insulted by other things the TV show did to Stannis, to Sansa, to Dorne, have been turned off. So if even the whole crowd of people still watching are people watching White Walker stuff, and your intention is to give them more of that's all they're exposed to. So even mainstream news sites that are not following the books, just going by the TV series, the reaction was mixed at best to this announcement, that they were posting op-eds saying there's reasons this would be problematic at best to this isn't really a good idea at all. It's a retread. So they can say this more succinctly than I can. I'll just quote off some of them here. I hope you've seen some of them yourselves. Post in the comments at Nerdist.com had a nice one reacting the week the announcement came out. And they said it's problematic that the new show seems like it will have, in some form, the exact same main villain as Game of Thrones, with the White Walkers playing a major role. Their mere presence will only invite comparisons to the original show, which could unfairly hurt it in the eye of the viewer. Any spin-off of the single most popular TV series in the world will live in a huge shadow, one that will only get bigger by repeating the villain. WinterIsComing.net also posted a nice op-ed. I really like WinterIsComing.net now. The current crop of writers they've had the past 2 years, unlike a couple of other news sites that always try to sugarcoat everything or put a positive spin on things like, oh no, the White Hunt was actually really good. WinterIsComing.net posts op-eds that just bluntly criticize things. And they try to be positive when they can. I feel they're actually a very well-balanced, objective site now. Dan Selke and his team, the current crop of editors, if you're not reading them again now, because they have a whole new crop of writers these past 2 years, please check them out, and I've been pleasantly surprised that I agree with most of their assessments of things now. So it was really nice that they wrote up an op-ed that was bluntly saying in the title, The Long Night isn't a good prequel idea. Just the title. Did HBO pick the right prequel? And they were saying no, they wanted one of the other ones. And this one has a lot of problems with it. Part of it here is, I worry that The Long Night will have the same basic structure as Game of Thrones. It's too similar. In the long run, Game of Thrones is a show about warring kingdoms too preoccupied with their own squabbles to realize that an existential threat is bearing down on them in the form of the White Walkers. With The Long Night tracing, quote, the world's descent from the golden age of heroes into its darkest hour, it seems like it could be more of the same, which would be a shame. And also there was Westeros.org's reaction video, which I'm going to link at the end of this video, by the World of Ice and Fire book co-authors with Martin, Elio and Linda, who were great. They run Westeros.org. And they could only guess that HBO favors Long Night above the other 4 prequel pitches because they want to somehow actively avoid Martin's writings entirely as much as possible, so they can just make up their own mindless, all-flash and no-substance TV series like Game of Thrones Season 5 onwards. It was an interesting review. We have no information, was basically what they were saying, and I like how Linda put it, this is probably the worst idea short of trying to make a sequel, given that the books aren't finished yet. Even though they've said none of the spin-offs will be sequels, only prequels, so that's right there. But they said, we think they're trying to are they trying to avoid Martin's writings as much as possible to just do what they want? I actually disagree with that for pragmatic reasons. The most pragmatic explanation is probably the most obvious, that I think they simply wanted to go with the prequel that had the most name recognition for TV-only fans. To hook back a big audience, that was the mentality of hook back the TV audience with something they're familiar with. And it worked too well. They didn't bother to think out, it's so familiar that it's just a rehash of the earlier show, that it isn't sustainable as a long-form series easily because the villains don't talk and they have no characterization. Now, there are other prequels they could have plausibly made that didn't need to be based on a novella Martin wrote as such, like something set before the Targaryen conquest, just during the Andal invasions. You could make up a narrative then and still have fairly familiar names and places. That I don't think it was we want to avoid even the vaguest hint of anything Martin wrote, even though there's nothing we know about what the world was like then. Those are other points I'm going to talk about. Just the most likely explanation is they're trying to get name recognition. I think, and hey, wouldn't be burdened by comparisons to Martin's writings, what would probably have been an unspoken bonus, but I don't think they would verbally say that in meetings. You want his stuff because he's a good writer. Maybe they did, I don't know, but if it was a secondary benefit. The primary thing I think driving this is just name recognition. That, yeah, by doubling down on what people already saw. I mean, that was a mentality that made The White Hunt in Season 7. Let's do something with name recognition. Remember how great Hardhome was at just grinding into the dust by repeating it, beating a dead horse, something that worked before. And they realized, well, it's the same. It somehow managed to be the same story, while at the same time taking out everything else we're familiar with, like King's Landing, The Faith of the Seven, all sorts of other things that we want to be part of this. So it's both boring and taking out everything we love. But thankfully, I'm not the only person saying this. This is why this is first and foremost the reason I'm putting right at the top of the video here. Please talk about this in the comments. It's a retread, and it's not even like, oh, here's another Star Wars spin-off set 1,000 years or later or earlier with yet another Sith Lord. There's variation among Sith Lords, their characters. The White Walkers and their undead zombies have no characterization, and they're literally the same characters, because they're deathless.